Alright, right into it, Sudden Impact fans. On November 13th, we witnessed absolute chaos at the live TNA Impact, where Frankie Kazarian walked out as the new TNA World Champion after a full-scale invasion by WWE developmental brand NXT. And this raises the question everyone's been asking since January this year. Is the WWE-TNA partnership actually good for TNA wrestling, or is it slowly destroying everything that makes TNA unique? I'm going to break down both sides today, and by the end, I want you to tell me in the comments if this partnership is a win-win, or is TNA getting the short end of the stick. So, without further ado, let's get started. Let's set the stage first up. January 16th of this year, WWE and TNA announced a multi-year partnership agreement. Now, this isn't WWE buying TNA. It is just a collaboration deal primarily between NXT and TNA wrestling. The basic idea of this is cross-promotional appearances, talent exchanges, and shared storylines. Now, that sounds great on paper, right? WWE gets fresh matchups for NXT, helps their wrestlers get experience, and the same thing for TNA, as well as getting the TNA wrestlers a massive exposure to WWE's massive audience. But here's where it gets complicated. Since the partnership, we've seen Joe Hendry appearing at the Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, NXT stars like Trick Williams and Kalani Jordan showing up on Impact and even winning the championships, as well as JC Jane from NXT as well. TNA wrestlers appearing at NXT events, and most recently, this complete NXT takeover at Turning Point a couple of days ago. So let's break down what's actually working and what's not. So let's start with the positives, because there are legitimate benefits here. Joe Hendry is the perfect example of this. Before this partnership, did many casual WWE fans know who Joe Hendry was? Maybe not. You happen to watch TNA or be heard of him when he was in his indie days. But now he's appeared at the Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, and he's become one of the most talked about wrestlers in the industry. That's massive exposure for a TNA wrestler that literally money cannot buy. Also, TNA's live event attendance has noticeably increased since the partnership began. The Bound for Glory and Turning Point 2025 events saw strong ticket sales, partly because fans knew that there'd be a WWE crossover appearances. Now that's real revenue for TNA. Also, there's been the fact that working with Shawn Michaels and the NXT creative team has given TNA wrestlers access to WWE's production expertise. The storylines have been more ambitious, the presentation has been improved, and there's been a legitimate buzz around TNA that hasn't existed in years. For younger TNA talents, such as Leon Slater and other people, getting to work with established NXT talent is invaluable experience. These crossover matches are helping to develop the next generation of TNA stars. So there are real benefits here, but now let's talk about the elephant in the room. Here's where things get uncomfortable, and I need to be honest with you. It looks completely unequal. Let's call it for what it is. This feels less like a partnership and more like WWE imposing their narrative on TNA wrestling. When NXT stars invade Impact and literally take over the show, when an NXT wrestler wins a TNA World Championship, TNA looks second rate. They look like WWE's minor league and not an equal partner. Joe Hendry, a guy that TNA's been building up for years, has had his contract bought out recently by WWE. Just think about that, Sudden Impact fans. This is a guy that TNA spent years building him up only for WWE to actually see what he was like on their programming, and then instead of trying to wait until his contract was over, just bought him out under TNA's contracting. But it's not anything new that's happened since this partnership has started. I mean, earlier in the year, they did pretty much the same thing with Jordan Grace, and it looks like they're doing the same thing with both Leon Slater and Matt Cardona. So this partnership is more favored in WWE's end. And here's something that really frustrates me about this whole partnership. AJ Styles, who has said that he would like to have more TNA matches, especially going into the final year of his wrestling career, which suggests that WWE main roster wrestlers also want to be a part of this TNA partnership, but they're not getting the opportunity because apparently it's only NXT and TNA Wrestling that has signed this partnership. So WWE main roster stars are missing out on having these possible dream matches as part of this partnership, meaning that TNA misses out on WWE's star power with having all of these great wrestlers that have had history with TNA wrestling appear back in TNA for a couple of matches to just help TNA get their TV deal across the line, and by doing massive numbers in this, not only the States, but across the world. And while it has been great exposure for those wrestlers, and having Trick Williams and Kalani Jordan and JC Jane take the TNA championships and feature them actively on NXT programming, it has been good that way to get the NXT fans interested in somewhat what's going on in TNA. It just would have been better if some main roster stars were also a part of this partnership as well. And instead, TNA is just left with getting all of their stars poached while having to work with developmental talent. It's not really that fair to TNA wrestling, this whole WWE-TNA partnership. Kurt Angle said a little while ago that WWE should buy TNA for their tape library. And to hear a guy that has had an extensive career in TNA wrestling say something like that is really quite heartbreaking, because it just goes to show that WWE can do those things. I mean, it's done it with AAA, it's done it with Evolve, it's done it with the entire UK scene, and it's done it basically. That's the whole strategy of WWE, especially that was revealed in the Mr. McMahon Netflix documentary series, where it gave insights into what WWE and Vince McMahon would do to all of the competitors. If you didn't watch that series, Vince McMahon was saying that he sees every other wrestling company that is not WWE as a feeder system for the WWE. And if he can't buy them out directly, he just does WWE is doing with TNA now. And that's really heartbreaking, but it doesn't surprise me that WWE is doing this at all. And in terms of narrative influence from the WWE, let's look at what happened at the most recent set of tapings that happened couple of days ago. On live taping episode of Impact that happened on the 13th of November, Frankie Kazarian shockingly won the TNA World Championship from Mike Santana, who lost the championship to him on the first night that he was featured in TNA wrestling after having won the championship at Bound for Glory. And this is just so indicative of what TNA is having to do because of the WWE influence, and the fact that if they try and push back slightly, WWE can just say, oh well, we'll just remove our partnership from you guys. And then the following evening at the Turning Point event, a whole bunch of NXT wrestlers also came down and caused a massive invasion of TNA, pretty much caused chaos. People are saying that this causes mainstream buzz and gets people talking about the product, but for long-term TNA fans, I know that this may not be something that you want to see happen, and it just cheapens the TNA product, having to see TNA sell its soul, basically, to WWE's partnership. My final verdict for this TNA WWE partnership, and I want to be very balanced here. While it has some good, the bad sides of this partnership far outweigh the positives. And TNA is starting to look like NXT's developmental system as well. Not only have they got Evolve, which is also NXT's developmental for the developmental system, but also TNA is beginning to become that as well. And it just shouldn't be treated like that. It's a legitimate company. It's got its own history and its own ownership as well. Now I want to hear from you, Sudden Impact fans. What do you think? If you enjoyed this deep dive into the WWE and TNA partnership, smash that like button and subscribe to Sudden Impact. And I will see you in the next one.